I'm Ralph Ferguson, Manager Director of the Ethics Center at Texas Tech University, and today we're discussing with staff ideas and concepts that would enrich our abilities to serve students and serve faculty and assist us in developing programs that will be enriching to staff. As staff, we're in situations where we have what is called situational leadership in most organizations, how we can more effectively, as students, make the administrative process more transparent, or how we can better communicate. I think that our former president, Don Harrigan, had that as part of his message, that the way that you administratively manage projects and operations have a tremendous impact on the institution.
My husband and I were in the Republic of Georgia a few years ago, and we found a kid who was graduating from high school and wanted to go to college in the U.S. We brought him here, and we put him through college. He lived with us, and we paid to get him through Tech, and he graduated with honors last May. It was all wonderful, and we had some problems because there are no student organizations for Georgians. He was the only one here.
Correct.
And that was a problem. He needed some of the same kinds of support that other kids coming from far, far away needed, and there just wasn't anything for him. He was kind of the Georgian Student Association all by himself.
Right.
Which was, it was easy enough to form the organization, so he did that, and then he was able to be in Students for Global Connections. My husband has established a relationship with some schools in Kazakhstan, and it was kind of all on his own, We were there on the same trip as we met Debbie in Georgia. We were in Almaty, and the university there has been calling my husband to come there and lecture, and he just got back from a trip. And some of their students are coming here now too, one at a time. I think that there have been 2 now, and a third one is going to be here in April. And this is all pretty much on his own, and the university doesn't seem to know it at all. And they need a place to live. And the last time that happened, it was a big problem because the dorms, of course, were full. And it turned out that a space opened up in an apartment with 2 other women. One of the women lived there. But for the first week or 2, we'd had to put her in a motel on the west side of town. And my husband was going to pick her up every day and bring her to. It was way, way out of the way. Those students have had an interesting time because, again, there's no student organization for Kazakhs. They don't know anything about they don't know anything about the U.S. when they get here. It's really, they need some support.
Just the simple journey to Lubbock. And a lot of international students are accustomed to getting to an airport or a central location, and there's obvious ways on how to get from that airport to where you're going. And they've run into a couple situations where students arrive at Lubbock Airport and it's not really apparent how to get to Texas Tech. It seems like a simple thing.
That's true.
But at the same time, when you're accustomed to having airports which are connected to bus systems or subway systems or something, they get there, and I think just recently, I know that they reopened, but our cab system or one of the shut down. So when you get to an airport, and if there's no transportation whatsoever, so they've had to call student affairs to say, I'm at the airport, how do I get to the university?
It might be nice to have an international orientation, whether that's a series of videos online that anyone could access.
Even a Texas Tech kiosk at the airport.
Yes.
What to do when you get here type.
Brochures or something.
I would agree with certainly the transportation part. I know that some of that is in place as far as the housing for graduate students, because I used to work for the foreign language building where we did the TOEFL test and stuff like that, and they address a lot of those problems with graduate students, but I don't know how much of that is going on with undergraduate students.
That's true. Yeah. Maybe we could add a mentorship program. Like if they had a mentor they could go to, whether it be an ambassador who everyone goes to, or whether it becomes someone that is assigned to them.
Both undergrad and graduate. And one thing that I've seen them that comes into concern for them is things like early admissions into the graduate programs. Because some of them are like, okay, well, I'm graduating with my undergraduate degree, and now I got to go back home. But I don't know if I've gotten into tech yet, if I'm going to get to stay. You know, people that are going to Health Science Center, they get early admissions a year, 2 years ahead of time, so they know they can plan for that. But none of the departments on the main campus have that sort of early admission process for students like that. One thing that I've run into most recently with, not often, but with international students that came from somewhere else and they did high school there, the College of Arts and Sciences has a foreign language requirement. And we can waive that if they have proof that their high school is taught in a different language. But there's no way for us to, you know, when students come here, they come with maybe community college transcripts. Oftentimes they don't have their high school transcripts. And when they do bring those high school transcripts, it's problematic for us because we have nobody to go to say, you know, how do we look at these and how do we translate these transcripts? I mean, it's not always the case, but if the student didn't have them when they first came, it's really hard for them to get them. And it's really hard for
That's
them.
very true.
And it's very hard for them to, you know, get that foreign language exemption that they deserve.
The translation, if they do have the high school record, the translations, do you send them out to an agency to get it done?
Our contact right now is Shelby Shirley in
Yeah.
graduate
Right.
admissions and international admissions. And so if we ever have problems, we email her and be like, we need help. As a College of Arts and Sciences, you have to have the 4 semesters of a foreign language to complete your degree, but you can be exempt from that if you were taught in another language in your home high school.
Okay. Okay.
And so that's,
Yeah, and that's true. That's true.
but I've the few students that I have worked on with them, it has been quite problematic for them if they didn't have that transcript already, or it's
No,
been
I
very,
understand.
very problematic for them.
I'm new to the Staff Center. This is my very first year, so I don't know. I mean, I know that they have other subcommittees that a lot of people serve on, so I think if you decided to come up with some kind of subcommittee, you'd have a lot of people that would want to join and help and say what's going on in their neighborhood. So that's one thing that I've seen very interesting about the committee. Like, it's not just Staff Senate, but it's also subcommittees to help you from all sorts of things, from discipline to parking to just general questions.
What motivated you to run for staff senate?
I just thought it was very interesting, and they're constantly helping, you know,
Yeah,
spread the word about
yeah.
so many things, and it was just really neat to be able to get it through them at a meeting instead of a tech announce. So that was fun.
As staff, just generically, what is absent, if you're not on the Senate or on the Senate, what is absent that we feel like we can add to what we do that will help us be better administratively across the university?
With our involvement with the Kazakh students, I think that's a really good example. He's done this individually. My husband was, you know, makes a relationship with that university in Almaty. And he's really alone with it. And bringing the students here from there, I think, is a great thing for the university.
It is.
To be known that far away, it's clear that's 12 time zones away. They know Texas Tech on the other side of the world, and that's great. He needs more help. When he can, if there was some place he could call and say, I've got this student that's going to kind of drop in April, and we need a place for him to live, and his English is horrible, apparently. So what he's going to be able to do here is really kind of up in the air. But we need someone to call about it and say, can you please help us?
I think sometimes lacks on the campus is a culture of participation. So, or it could be communication is the issue. So you have, I remember an event I attended that was sponsored by IT and one of the international student organizations regarding safety in the internet. You know, it's such a critical issue. They had a wonderful panel discussion, very high status panelists, both from the university and outside the university. And it's just a handful of members in the audience.
Was there anything during new employee orientation that addresses, you know, what to do when you have questions about international students. Something like that, maybe a short video.
Well, I know that we were building something like that with Yasik, Dr. Johnson, in the Graduate Student Association.
Many staff deal with, in some form or another, regulations, compliance, things that have to be done, things that if they're neglected, people will get into trouble. Students, a lot of times, have never encountered this, especially graduate students who largely took classes and tests and then went home. And when you make that evolution to graduate school, all of a sudden there are boxes that need to be checked and things that need to be signed, and they don't necessarily, as staff are chasing them around on email trying to get them to do the work, they are resistant because they've never encountered this. Even general education on the fact that, you know, welcome to the adult world, and now there are things that you have to do that aren't necessarily part of your studies, but it's part of now being a professional.
It's that process.
Yeah,
It's that
so,
process.
you know, the staff basically are largely trying to get everybody to do things right so that people don't get into trouble, as opposed to, you know, necessarily want to be a nag and pushy and all of that, because there are, you know, we have federal dollars on campus, we have state dollars on campus, we have private funding on campus, and based on all of these types of situations, there are regulations in place. Even something like that in graduate student education, where they start to realize that they are now a professional.
I work with international students
Okay.
in my office, and I have similar questions. You know, she wants to stay in the country, she wants to go to grad school, but she has to pass this test, and you know, what all does that entail? And you know, all of those questions have come up pretty frequently.
There's so many divisions on campuses. How could you do this that it would be quick, useful, and effective for so many divisions? And what popped into my head was the concept of the elevator talk or the 3-minute talk. It's kind of like, you have 3 minutes. Tell us what we need to know about tuition. Tell us what we need to know about responsible research. You got 3 minutes.
Mary Ann, we need that, but that is the only way we can get it done.
Exactly. So the critical message, not the entire history and
Exactly.
broad spectrum of the department, but what is your critical message?
I think we'll always have a problem with minority languages. We have big Chinese organizations on campus, we have they're probably Hindi speaking and things like that, but kids who speak Kazakh or Georgian or something, that's always going to be a problem. And our Georgian kid spoke pretty good English when he got here, and that was wonderful, but some of these Kazakh students really don't. And that's just one more problem. I mean, we've got to find a way to communicate.
The other thing is and possibly a way to organize that would be questions that are relevant across campus. Kind of like, what are you doing with regard to academic integrity? And so, you know, I could say what's in research, others could say, well, what's happening in English with regard. But, you know what I mean? Because academic integrity is a cultural issue. There's many interpretations of academic integrity across cultures, so that's a cultural issue. It's also handled across disciplines very differently. So, or what problems and solutions have you come up with regard to tuition? Or, you know, so figure out like the question of the year or semester, and we're going to talk about what everyone's doing on this topic. But it has to be, or probably would best be, a topic that everybody deals with and are dealing with it in their own silo, as opposed to perhaps sharing the information, because there could be departments that are handling international students exceptionally well and others that are not doing so well, and that kind of crosstalk.